Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about miracles, and I'm not going to be using a script, so we'll see how that goes. But hopefully I can give you a more nuanced view of miracles than you had before you started watching this video. I don't know, we'll see. So what is a miracle? Well, in a really broad sense, it would just be God or some supernatural agent interacting with the world. And it would usually be some sort of improbable or really fantastic seeming event. But let's look at a really narrow definition put forward by David Hume, one of my favorite skeptics. He's a prominent atheist, and he's actually written what's one of the most well-recognized philosophical writings on the topic of miracles. So, to quote him, his writing is called Of Miracles, by the way. And to quote him, he says that a miracle, let's go ahead and quote directly, a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature. So he offers a very narrow definition, and I think a lot of people have adopted that understanding, that a miracle somehow violates the laws of nature. And I can see why people do it. I believe one reason why thinking about it in such a narrow sense would be due to a quote by Arthur Clarke. He says that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And the way I think that applies here is that if God really did create the laws of nature, then he would certainly understand them and be able to use them at a level that we as humans have not reached yet. So it would seem like magic to us. It would seem like he's violating the laws of nature. But pretty much the average person on the street, if you say that God interacted with nature in a certain way, he would call that miraculous. And I don't think there's any reason to assume that when God interacts with nature, he would have to do so in a way that violates the laws of nature. I mean, after all, we're dealing with an omnipotent deity here, so if that is the case, then it would be severely limiting him, or limiting his omnipotence, to say that he must violate the laws of nature in order to bring about his goals. Certainly, if he's omnipotent and has goals, he could either bring about those goals by violating the laws of nature or by acting within them. I don't think there'd be a reason to limit our understanding of how he can act. But let's take a look at an example in particular here. So from the Old Testament, one example of a miracle comes from the prophet Elijah. He builds an altar, and then the people tell him, you know, if your God is real, have him light this altar on fire. And then Elijah calls to God and asks him to send fire down from heaven, and God does, and this fire comes down and consumes the entire altar. So at the time, because those people don't have as much knowledge of science as we do, they probably didn't have many explanations for this event. It would seem like it violates the laws of nature. So the most common explanation would be that God somehow magically created fire and then sent it down and consumed the altar. But a possible naturalistic explanation for that would be something like a meteorite coming down and hitting the altar. But I don't think either one is less miraculous just because we understand the naturalistic explanation. It's like if we believe that a meteor was the way God sent fire down from heaven, it wouldn't make it less miraculous. The problem is, I think that, and I think atheists and Christians tend to make this same mistake, is assuming that figuring out a naturalistic explanation, what naturalistic explanation was used, is simultaneous with disproving that there was a creator of nature behind it all, when it really doesn't imply that at all. So let's think about that example. If Elijah's story is true and fire did come down from heaven, does realizing that would proving that it was a meteorite make it any less impressive? I don't think that would be the case at all. That would mean that some star, however many light years away, has either died or somehow a rock has been sent in our direction. And the laws of nature have causally determined it to strike the earth at that specific day, at that specific moment, at that specific place. I really can't think of any way to describe that besides miraculous. In fact, that actually seems to have a more forethought behind it. It would be even more impressive than just spontaneously creating fire. That means that God had that miracle shipped en route before Elijah even knew he was going to ask for the miracle. And if we think about how long it takes objects to travel through space, that was likely long before Elijah was ever even born. So I think that actually makes it a bit more impressive, more miraculous. But one of the things I'm getting at here is if we think about miracles as possibly having naturalistic explanations, if we're okay with that, then that has some implications for creation. So me and creationists actually agree in the sense that we both believe God could have created the world using some kind of spontaneous, magical creation that we could never come to understand. It would just violate the laws of nature and be incomprehensible to us. But I think that if the creationist is willing to really grant that God's omnipotent, he must also agree that it is at least possible that God could have created using some naturalistic method, like evolution, for example. And I think once we're at that step, it becomes a question of which method did he actually use, which one's more probable. And we can play the game of evaluating the pros and cons of why God might choose one method over the other, like saying, for example, God might want to use a process like evolution because we can then study it and come to know it, and it might even benefit us, especially in areas like the medical fields. But we don't have to limit ourselves to just speculating over the pros and cons of each method. There is a way we can use to determine if God created which method would be more probable, and that method is called science. That helps us study the natural world and figure things out. Now, interestingly, young Earth creationists and myself are going to disagree about what science tells us, and that's fine. We can have a purely scientific disagreement, and that will be the, I'm sure, a good topic for future videos and discussions. As always, test everything, hold on to the good.